Welcome back, everybody. I'm Sean LaFlock. I'm here with Scotty Hagness. This is Conversations, Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity. Scott, how goes it, man?
Pretty good. You see that I'm looking darker than usual with
I
this new
I
angle
was
in the
the
office.
new
Yeah.
angle, and then you got like a little blank slate back there. What's going to be going up behind you?
I think that's where the glass board, I have a big heavy pane of
Uh,
glass that's kind of like a whiteboard, but you can see the background through it because it's kind of opaque. It's pretty cool. I like it, but the thing is super heavy, and I lost the brackets in the process of moving. So might be a week or two before I can discover them in this 6,000 square feet of construction zone right now.
yeah, that's
This is
very.
I took a shelf down and there
I was
apparently
gonna
we didn't
say.
paint behind it, so there's
I
this
was gonna
line up
say it
there.
looks a little barren behind there.
Yeah, I gotta find. We have a lot of leftover paint. I'm hoping we have some of this little light baby blue color I can put up there.
Yep. Um, so we finished a little bit of the just talk of the games and the setup and all that kind of stuff. And you really didn't get into the workouts or too much about the performances of athletes in particular. But I figured we'll go like part two here today of this
Hmm.
game's breakdown. Even though a little bit of the buzz is kind of uh, you know dissolved a little bit, but I think it's actually a cool thing to start gearing up for the next season. And a lot of ideas have been flooding through my head about how I'm going to increase, athletes' performance and considerations and that kind of stuff. So it'd be a cool thing to kind of run those by you as well.
Yeah.
All right, so the games themselves. Uh, The games themselves were the events I thought were very well done, well organized, well crafted, um, very balanced. I thought that everything was kind of tested in some kind of way. They didn't necessarily, get too crazy with some of the stuff. Now, whenever you're thinking of Masters events, I've always agreed. I've always had a philosophy that the games events for the Masters are always done fairly well, just because I think that they have to be a little bit more inclusive to not only the now in the 35 to 39 age group, but all the way up to 60 plus. They have a bit of variance over 50, so they'll modify movements and they'll modify weights. But regardless if you're 35 or you're 49, you're doing the same workouts. So the first workout of the weekend was the run, swim, run. It was a mile and a half run, 500-meter swim, mile and a half run, and it was out and back kind of course. So the training that my athlete and I, or my athlete, me, but
You're
I
gonna do
mean,
the training also.
I was doing a little, I was doing a lot of the training also, just because I wanted her to have someone to train with, and also to kind of, be able to push and also have an understanding of where she is versus where I am as well.
Hmm.
And so our thought on that first workout was, let's push the runs a little bit. We'll kind of cruise on the swim, and then on that second run, we'll really go after it. The thing was, they started all 120 athletes together from the age 35 all the way up to 49. So men and women. So that's 120 athletes who are just basically just running out of the corral and just going. Myra had done a open water swim of a 1K about 2 weeks prior and did fine. She did it in about 20 minutes. She was cool, calm. It was in a lake. And this was going to be in a lake as well, so no issues. She did the first mile and a half. Wasn't crushing it. Her idea wasn't, I didn't want to go into the water breathing too heavy because I wanted to be able to get in and start moving. So she dives into the water, and she just instantly gets clobbered by like 5 people. Like, she got to a point where she was like about to scream for help because she thought she was drowning. So
Oh
she
man.
completely freaked out. Like, she was on her back for a bit of it and just freaked. It's like she probably added about 3 to 5 minutes of time to the swim that she wouldn't have had she not been destroyed. Like, there was a swim in Biscayne Bay during Wadapalooza that she did fine in. Like, she held her own, and if not, like, caught people on the swim or held her lead on the swim. And that was like a 250-meter open water swim in kind of ocean type stuff with salt water. This one, as we're sitting at the finish line, we're seeing all the competitors start to come in, and I kind of guesstimated her time. I'm like, well, Fikowski did it in 28 minutes. Add 10 minutes, and that's pretty much what she's going to do. So we had some really solid athletes coming through at 31 minutes. I was like, damn, that's pretty impressive. Like masters athletes beating a lot of the games competitors,
Mm-hmm.
and the few more athletes come in, few more athletes, like 10 athletes go by. I'm like, oh, something must have happened. So she's hoofing it, running nice and fast all the way up. And then she gets to the finish line, and I kind of go to back to the warm up area, wait for her. I'm like, what happened? And and my thought is like, she cramped up, she sprained an ankle. I don't know, something happened. She goes, I got in the
Yeah.
water and I just got clobbered, and I freaked out. And I'm like, oh, that sucks. So she finished 12th in the event, and she caught 3 people in the second run also. So at some point she was like 5th from last, like she was struggling.
Wow.
So, we get done with that workout. I'm like, all right, let's just shake it off. It was a long day as is. And now we're sitting, in 12th place. And we're like, uh-oh, is this a fantasy here? So I'm like, the next event that day was a snatch, max snatch. And I'm like, all right, this is in our wheelhouse. We're probably not going to win this, but we're going to do well. So we're in the warm-up area. I'm kind of checking out all the other women, kind of warming up and that kind of stuff. I'm like, well, Myra's definitely got a bigger snatch than most of them. There was one gal who her name was something Trojanowski, who was a little bit bigger athlete, and like her personal best was like 200 in the snatch. So I'm like, pretty much she's got it locked up unless she just completely shits the bed. So we had Myra open up at she put 125 on the bar, power snatched it, then went 155, 165, 175, hit him. There was a 6-minute clock just to build to a max. She hit 175, and that put her like right into like the top 5 right there. So I'm far away from her on the snatch, in the crowd. So, beforehand I go, look to me, I'll tell you what to put on the bar. So they had every like denomination on the bar. They had half-pound plates, so you could have put 1 pound on the bar. And so I'm, she tries to hit 185. She misses it. The girl who is closest to me hits 186. So Myra tries for 185 again, misses it, and I go, and I'm saying to myself, I'm waving at her, I'm trying to, and I know what's happening. She's like, I got to hit this weight, she's not even thinking about, okay, I got to go up or I got to go down, whatever. So I see the other athletes, they're all in like the 160s and that kind of stuff. So I'm like, okay, she's got something locked up here, but I want to maximize all the points that she can get. So 186 would tie for second. So she tries, I think, once more, and then she hits 185 with like a maybe 45 seconds left. She hits the 185, and I was like, damn it. Like, I wish she had 186 on the bar. That would have not been much of a difference. And then she pulls 190 and she doesn't get it, or 187 and doesn't get it, or something like that. So she finishes third. First was actually 202 and a half, or
Yeah, a little over
202.
2. Yeah, that was the only event. One of the few events I saw was the her snatch workout.
Yeah, exactly. And she was just exhausted after that workout. I could just tell she was, and even going in, she didn't have that pop of like really snapping it off. And I was like, oh boy, like I hope she's able to hit 185. But she hit 185. That's 97% of her max. She's hit 190 once in her life, and to do that first workout, get clobbered, and then come in and hit 185 on a big stage, we'll take it. And she missed it a few times, so there's nothing. There was no. She didn't have any right to think she was going to make it after missing it 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
So we get through with it, get done. In between the run, swim, run, and the snatch, I think we went back to the hotel just to kind of calm down. We got our gear and then came back. So we were able to get out of there a little bit and kind of like reassess and reset a little bit. So I think that was important, just to kind of get out of there and shake off that horrible experience in the morning. And we were able to kind of salvage something decent in the afternoon. So the first day was done with, and we're like, we have a 12th and we have a 3rd. So I believe we were in 8th place after the first day. And I'm like, you know what? That was our egg. We laid our egg. Done. Let's move on. Next day, we'll see what happens. So the next day started in the Coliseum with the bike overhead walking lunge. So when you look at this workout on paper, it's 30-calorie assault bike, and then you have to do a 100-foot walking lunge with a single dumbbell overhead. So it's 50 pounds. And after assessing what the field looked like, I was like, this is going to be a pretty good workout for Myra. Like in my gut, I was like, she's not going to do great on the bike, but she's going to do well on the walking lunges just because her overhead mobility and her ability to breathe with a dumbbell overhead is very good relative to the field. We had been working on assault bike work for a while. Like that was her bane of her existence. She's like, I hate the assault bike. I hate the assault bike. It burns. My legs always die, etc. So I go, all right, we have a fantastic little warm up. There's the warm up area, and then there's the warm up area, and then there's a warm up area within the Coliseum underneath. So they called them to their corral within the warm up area in the back. Then they brought them to the Coliseum. And once they got to the Coliseum, they had about 20 minutes. So I reserved a bike for Myra. They had 4 bikes. I was like, Myra, you're getting on this bike. I don't care if anybody else gets a bike. We're warming up properly. Yeah. So we had 10 minutes to warm up before they corralled them within the Coliseum. So we did a progressive aerobic warm up where we would do every minute on the minute you're going to sprint for 10 seconds, and each minute you'll increase the intensity, and then after that last minute we'll get off, do a set of overhead walking lunges, and then we'll be good. So we revved up the engine. She was holding 90 watts or 90 RPMs on her little 10-second sprint, got off, picked up the dumbbell, did the walking lunges. She was like, okay, I feel good. I feel confident about this. I'm like, all right, great. So I'm like, here's the strategy. You're just going to, for the first 10 to 20 seconds on the assault bike, smash it. Pretty much go as hard as you can, and then bring it back down to 85, 90%. Just hold on so you can catch your breath a little bit and get off, go unbroken on the lunges one way, go unbroken on the other way. So the event starts. Meanwhile, the Coliseum's awesome. It's a great atmosphere. The big board is up there. They have the announcers, the whole thing. They start the bike, and apparently the sensor or whatever way they were tracking it wasn't really catching Myra's bike.
Oh, no.
So it's looking like she's not even on the board. I'm like, Jesus, is she going that slow? And after about 50 seconds, her judge's hand goes up. I'm like, what? And all of a sudden, she's first off the bike. I was like, are you kidding me? She smashed it. She smashed the bike. She gets up, starts walking. This girl, Shoal, who's on the other side of the stadium, she gets off and starts really motoring over to her dumbbell. I was like, oh, boy. So I'm like, all right, Myra's doing well. She finished almost first off the bike. She moseys onto the dumbbell. She's got her chalk there. She chalks up, brings it up overhead. And within 2 lunges, I say, okay, she's got a good position and she's good. And then you look at the gal Shoal, who's got really compromised overhead position, really can't keep good midline stability. She's slow. I'm like, Myra's got this. So she gets down. Becca Voigt makes a huge move, and she starts coming down the line. Myra gets a no rep on the last step, goes back, does the step over the line, brings the dumbbell up, jumps onto the podium. Or the finish line 0.3 of a second ahead of Becca Voigt. So she wins the event. So it was pandemonium. Everybody's going nuts. It was an awesome feeling and an awesome relief after yesterday's highs and lows to come in and just knock it out of the park. It was such a cool thing. And she had the best time out of all the female competitors that competed within that event. And it was a really cool, check mark in the mind to say, those hard assault bike, painful kind of things have worked to our advantage and have become a strength relative to the field. She had tested that one in training, and she actually did faster than what she did in training. She put the dumbbell down in training. When she got there, she didn't put the dumbbell down. So she was able to go unbroken, even with a no rep, and still do fine. So it was a really, really good event. And that put her in first place. She was tied in first place with Becca, but because she had a win, she was in first place. So awesome way to start the day. The second event was the O course. And the day that they tried it out, she kind of zoomed through it on a wet track. I was like, she's going to do well here. She's an athlete. She does balance beam stuff. She's a former gymnast. She does this stuff. We played around in training with a makeshift course. We did rope swings. Almost everything that was there happened to be stuff that we practiced. There was nothing that we really practiced. The only thing that we didn't practice was like the ladder, that freestanding ladder.
Yeah, the car ladder.
Yeah, she's in the second to last heat because she was in 8th the day before. They did in sets of 5. They sent the women off. She smoked it. She got beat by maybe a tenth or 2/10 of a second by the girl in her heat who ended up winning the whole thing, that whole event. But she finished second. I mean, she crushed it. So we have a first, a second. Last event of the day was chest to bar, 50 chest to bar, 40 toes to bar, and then 30 clean and jerks with 145 pounds. So we tried this one in training. I believe she finished in about 9 minutes without like big transitions, that kind of stuff. But, it's a third workout of the day. So a lot of those adrenaline kind of going, a lot of stress. We did the best we could to kind of minimize all that kind of thing. And in training, I think she did 25 unbroken, and then she did like 15 10 or something like that because it had to be 50, right? Yeah. So I think we did 25 15 10. So I was like, all right, that's pretty much what we're going to do for the chest to bar. Just do it in 3 sets. Toe to bar, break it up a little bit more. So I think I said like go 10 10 5 5 5 5 for the 40. I was like, go a little bit like smaller sets just because you're not grunting through those last like 3 or 4 reps within the set of the toes to bar, which could be a tendency. You're in a good rhythm and all of a sudden you have to work a little harder and it just makes it harder for you to utilize oxygen in those positions. So I'm like, just break it a little bit more. Go sets of 5, do a couple sets of 10, and then go sets of 5. So, and then the 145, I'm like, just one at a time, just keep going. So there was only like 2 or 3 other girls who made a move on the chest to bar like she was able to do, and then toe to bar. The thing was she worked a little bit extra harder than she needed to on the toe to bar because the bars were more slippery than she was used to. So chalk really wasn't helping all that much, and she wears gymnastics grip, so that's just going to make it more slick. And she's a sweatier athlete, so it's just challenging for her to figure out like what to do. So she probably used a little extra grip and energy on the toe to bar that she wanted to. And then that last 30 clean and jerks was just just struggle, just figure out a way and just move the bar. She moves the bar with such fluidity and efficiency. But one of the things that I noticed, and I kind of made a note in the back of my head, and I followed up with this later on. I'm like, this was an aerobic power workout. It was CP capacity, but in the sense that it was very submaximal and you had to move under a massive amount of fatigue after 90 contractions of the upper body. So we both know that chest to bar pull-ups are a high power movement. And for a lot of people, especially if you're really struggling on the toe to bar, those become a high breathing movement as well. Mm-hmm. Those 30 clean and jerks, I mean, that's tough. That's
a tough follow there.
That's one of those weights where you're moving that bar and you're like, I can move this, but it is painful. Like I probably would say when she picked up that first bar, you've done Grace before, right?
Oh, yeah.
The last 10 reps of Grace? That's probably what the first rep felt like for her when she got on that bar. So I made a mental note of that. And looking on it now, and I kind of want to throw something off of you and see what your thoughts are. I'm like, so that was an aerobic power workout. As much as it was like a gymnastics skill / maybe CP capacity, she was using about 63% of her max clean and jerk on those 145-pound power cleans. Her limiter was the fact that she was not getting enough blood and oxygen into her muscles, which would I consider aerobic power and aerobic ability, right?
Yeah.
So, given the fact that, all right, so let's talk about strategy for a workout like that. How would you coach a workout? How would you coach an athlete through a workout like that to maximize their performance, where that they have some kind of gymnastics ability, but that 145-pound barbell is going to be the limiter most likely?
Yeah, I think that probably a trade-off of it sounds like what you did, is you fraction the gymnastic movements a tad more, very quick fractions, but you try to keep those the localized fatigue as low as possible and aerobic as possible without starting to train too deep, in these sort of anaerobic metabolism, so that you're not right at that threshold once you reach the bar, and knowing that you can make up for the fact you took a tad longer through the gymnastic stuff, so hopefully be able to cycle through the bar quicker. But as far as, a training method, then of course, what is the limiter? Is it, that's enough of a load that the breathing muscles come into that double whammy of postural stability and inspiration.
Yep.
So some things that I'm exploring now are some of the maximal expansive breathing concepts to try to develop in-range strength in the diaphragm. So not like we would do with muscles, but then from just a training and practice perspective, you've kind of got to get to that place and work on breathing efficiency with the movements. What do you say was 60% of her max?
Yeah.
So she probably wouldn't have to fully brace under that and could keep breathing through those reps. If not, then that would be something to work on, practicing that. And of course, high fatigue, and where maybe normally she can do it that way.
Yeah.
Under high fatigue, maybe you do have to go to some of those lockdown methods where you're going to go toward a more hypoxic state.
Yeah. So actually, just thinking about what you were saying in terms of like diaphragmatic work, is that even the purpose of a warm up, even though you're warming up your body and you're getting your muscles and your heart rate up and that kind of stuff, I never even thought about the fact that you're warming up your diaphragm too.
Mm-hmm.
Like that. It's such a simplistic thing. You're like, okay, Sean, you know about that, don't you? I go, yeah, but when you're doing a warm up, are you actually warming up your breathing muscles? Can you actually get a full inspiration? Because like when I'm sitting here right now, I'm like I get a deep breath, but I know like after I do a good warm up, I'm always like, and I get that little extra deep breath, kind of getting that bottom of your lungs filled up with air. So it's like, if you're completely, ice cold and you're trying to take deep breaths and you're not able to do that, you're basically unable. It's like taking your intake on your engine and you're just covering half of it up and be like, all right, let's roll. But like
having a regulator on the the NASCAR or something.
It's like, exactly. So that's a good point, and actually training that as well, and training yourself to stay relaxed and not holding your breath during those contractions. Because you say a clean and jerk is let's say 3 to 4 seconds of a timer retention, right? Mm-hmm. Clean, boom, jerk. Let's say 3 seconds to be conservative. Imagine you're rowing 1,000 meters, and every 3 strokes, you've got to hold your breath for 3 seconds.
Yeah, that's going to go south really quickly, right? Yeah. But that's essentially what we were doing, if we're trying to barbell cycle. Yeah. And we don't have the efficiency of breathing that we need, especially when it's at those loads they're sort of heavy, but not really.
Yeah, it ain't a 65-pound thruster. It's, you have to be able to brace or you have to have some kind of bracing, but that bracing has to become aerobic as well.
Exactly. Yeah, and I haven't employed this exact strategy, but if I had that same situation, it might be something where periodically in training, not real frequently, because I think it'd be pretty stressful on the athlete, but you would get to that place and then you would find whatever load could be done under high fatigue, but still using a breathing strategy that didn't require bracing.
Yep.
And then just like anything else, the next session you come back with a little bit heavier weight.
Yep.
And so very specific, very kind of razor focus on a certain quality.
Yep, I think.
And then of course you'd have the issue of maybe several different lifts. Obviously, it's not just a clean and jerk. We want to be able to.
Yeah, it would definitely be position specific in terms of the move, or in terms of the breathing pattern. Now, that would obviously be something that you would want to do more toward the later stages, toward like 6 weeks out type stuff, competition, right?
You could do that, but it could be some not early off season work certainly, because you probably want to deload from going quite to that place. But you definitely want to get some practice in it, because it's a skill.
Yep.
And as we know how once you go to that deep dark place in a workout, how the brain tends to shut off and only go to the most repeated pattern. So if you want to have access to it without having to consciously think about it, or in cases where your coaches can't be there, you have to remind you constantly, then you got to practice it a lot.
Yeah, the thing that I always kind of default to when I think about those types of things, because obviously you have to train those things, right? But I don't want to beat down the athlete too far out from competition. But it's a skill that you have to practice.
Yeah. Well,
So go ahead.
I would say, so you could definitely practice in a less stressful manner where
Yep.
you're doing cluster sets. Maybe they're not heavy clusters where you're necessarily trying to go to your absolute max. Your max becomes what you can do without doing a full lockdown brace,
Yeah.
still breathing through the movements. And
Yeah.
so you're avoiding going, high fatigue, high aerobic output
Yeah.
prior to doing it. That's more of a later. Now we're getting a little closer to competition. We're
Yeah.
going to employ a more realistic, real world test.
Yeah, like because it's a skill. So the thing is that you have to practice the skill, but to practice the skill, it requires some kind of fatigue to actually practice the skill. So one of the things like just came to mind was like doing like a tough, let's say 500-meter row or a 400-meter run, and kind of getting hypoxic, and then
Mm-hmm.
performing those submaximal reps and learning how to continue to breathe and even recover during those submaximal, like those clean and jerks or snatches or whatever it might be, to practice. So you fatigue yourself by doing aerobic work that could be cyclical, but it gets you to the place in terms of your heart rate, and then you go ahead and practice those CNS movements rather than saying, okay, we're just going to do 30 clean and jerks. You're going to do a 400-meter run and then 5 clean and jerks, and you'll do repeats like that to practice the skill. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, and that way, yeah, and we definitely don't have to do 100 gymnastic contractions to lead off.
Yeah.
It can be shorter and higher output kind of
Yeah.
things to get to create a similar effect. Certainly.
Yeah. I would say that the way I guess there's a lot of converging ideas that are starting to come up. If you look at all the OPT stuff that he's putting up now, and a lot of his coaches, and Mike Lee, and some of the other remote coaches, and then even the stuff they're doing at Training Think Tank, I think everybody's kind of converging on some ideas about how to train muscular endurance. And through the Moxie testing and through a lot of observational work, it seems less and less of the fact that there's not as much localized inability to do the work. It's more of the fact that we're unable to produce the power or produce the fuel from the heart and lungs to get to those areas. So like there's enough capillary density, there's enough mitochondrial density within, let's say, the quads for you to keep going. But all of a sudden your quads start to burn. And you're like, what's going on? Am I just producing too much lactate? Well, the question becomes, why are you producing lactate in your legs when you're supposed to be doing an aerobic effort? So when we do this Moxie testing, we say, okay, it's not your mitochondrial and capillary density. It's the fact that your heart and lungs aren't able to get that fuel to your legs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, because there's a lot of pooling of blood within that area, your blood pressure raises locally, right? But
Mm-hmm.
if you have a strong enough heart and cardiac output, you should be able to continue to push blood through the area and obviously be able to replenish fuel and create an aerobic environment sustainability. Now, like that would take out the idea of like doing localized like blood flow restriction stuff. I think for sustainability and aerobic performance, I don't think that's the best kind of thing to do. I think it's more upstream. It's like we already kind of hit on cardiac output, actual being able to breathe within the positions that are required. So if you are very good at rowing and you have no problem burning out there, but as soon as you start to run and your positional breathing changes, you've got to address that. So the actual positional breathing and then learning how to create an aerobic environment through inspiration and correct control of your heart rate so that you can teeter on fueling the body and not spilling over, and kind of knowing who you are, so to speak. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Totally. Yeah, I know. A few years back when I did Moxie testing
Yep.
on myself, I know that my breathing, inspiration in particular, was very poor and was not allowing, not getting rid of enough carbon dioxide to allow the oxygen to get left at the site where it's going to be used at the site of the muscle. So it was a problem of So there's lots of factors that go in there, and it was something you would not have ever really thought about before until we start to see some of this stuff with technology and some new thinking around really how
Yeah.
some of that more central stuff is really what's
Just
going
just you
on.
saying that also kind of made a connection in my brain as well. Is that a lot of the time when we're doing our training, we're in such a more of a parasympathetic state, and we don't. It's not as likely when you're doing training that you kind of like just bonk out in 2 minutes. You're like, yeah, I'm doing this training session. Yet, if you had a tester to do, or you're in a competition, and all of a sudden your adrenaline's on, and you're in a sympathetic state, it's much more likely that you're going to go ahead and spill over too soon, because in that sympathetic state, the way I think about it is you'll have an inability to expire
Mm-hmm.
in those first 2 minutes. So you're like,
Mm-hmm.
uh-oh, like I literally haven't gotten rid of any of this CO2 yet. How am I supposed to actually have a sustainable effort?
Yeah.
So, one more step. When I used to do wrestling, they have this thing that you do. It's a protocol to get yourself ready for a match, and we would consider it a second win protocol. So basically, what we would do is, you have a good aerobic warm up, and this is before I knew anything. I just got this from like we did Iowa style wrestling, and this is what they would do at the University of Iowa, or Iowa University, for their wrestling. They would do like a good aerobic warm up, but then they would do an all out effort 2 minutes before the match, to the point where you were really like almost doubled over. I would do like squat jumps to the point where my heart
Oh
rate
yeah.
was really high up, and
Yeah.
then I would take some breaths, and then all of a sudden, like my heart rate would come back down, and then I got into the match, and I was able to go right into a sustainable pace, because it's like I got my second win. But it's almost like you get the adrenaline dump, your sympathetic nervous system goes, and then all of a sudden you're kind of, and now you're able to breathe. The unfortunate part about a wrestling match is if you don't do that prior to the match, and you do it in your first round, now you can't stop. Now you're stuck on the mat. Same thing in a workout. If you don't get that kind of heart rate up and then bring it back down prior to the start of the workout, you're going to use that first 2 minutes as your warm up. And then all of a sudden you're like, uh-oh, I have to hold this pace now. But you haven't breathed out in 2 minutes. So it's like, uh-oh, like now you're going to have to figure this out on the fly.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah, that's a really, really good point. I'd, get a little sympathetic stimulus, but clear that a little bit, and then let the person come back on. You need both for performance, obviously, and
Yeah.
right balance. But I think we've all, even at our, fittest, I think we've all experienced sometimes. Like you've been sitting, maybe you've been in the car or something, and you have to suddenly walk up a couple flights of stairs, or maybe it's a hill or something, and your legs will burn. And you're like, what the heck? What the hell? I can do, all this in the gym and I'm fine. Why are my legs burning like I'm out of shape because I just suddenly walked up 2 flights of stairs? Well, part of it is that your breathing is still barely, it hasn't matched.
Yes.
You're getting this,
Yes.
this over reliance on an anaerobic system, even though you may have this amazing aerobic capacity.
Yeah.
It just isn't switched on, and you have it. Your breathing, isn't necessarily congruent with that.
Before we go for today, Scott, because I know we kind of got to wrap this up,
Oh yeah, yeah. Come on.
can you quickly just run through, because I know you had spoke about this before, and I just kind of want to review this, is the inspiration expiration protocols that you tried out and you
Mm-hmm.
practiced through like your aerobic training, like, and I know you have some literature to back this up as well. Can you just briefly touch on that?
Yeah, we can, and we can do a whole thing on this. But so basically, there's a couple of things I've done. I initially was using something called a Power Breathe, which is like a relatively inexpensive resisted inspiration device,
Uh-huh.
which I would work through at an ever increasing pace. I think I did a couple minutes twice a day on
Yep.
days I wasn't training hard and breathing a lot otherwise. And jacking up as I was able to, but the problem, it was really very difficult to keep some of the accessory muscles
Yeah.
relaxed through that protocol. I actually like some of the FRC principles of maximal expansive breathing a lot better.
Yep.
So what I do as part of my mobility work, or in warm-ups if I'm going to go hard, I'm going to do this as soon as we get off the phone, because I have a hill climbing bike workout to do. I'll get in a position that I want to facilitate, typically some sort of kneeling lunge, hip opening, but it can be other things. And I'm holding position and I'm inhaling maximally. Like when I think I can't take it anymore, I'm trying to suck more in, but you're not locking your throat down. You're to hold it, you're holding it with just pure muscular effort. Throat still open. Inhale, let it out. Inhale, let it out. Roughly, maybe depends 5 to 10 times. And on the last inhalation, I'm trying to hold that to failure. And it is intense. Like I have a real difficulty holding the max inhales long because the muscles by that point are so fatigued. It feels just like any other muscle. It'll feel like something you're used to, just in a place you've never felt it. Now you can work the other end too, which is maximal exhalation while holding position. Delightful to do when you're stretching your hip flexors, by the way. And same idea, everything out, every little bit that usually sits in there, that dead air, squeeze it out. Inhale. And then the last one, same thing. Hold that maximal exhalation again. Throat's open. I last longer there. As a good protocol, they suggest that if you do 10 reps, truly maximal, whether it's on the inhale or the exhale, you should then be able to lock down and hold for at least a minute at max contraction after that.
So even with the air out, you should be able to hold a minute there.
Yeah, wow. Which I don't have too much trouble with that now. That might be from some of that other
inspiration that I have a hard time holding it.
Oh, so hard.
Especially not recruiting neck and accessory muscle. Like
really trying to. Yeah, and there'll be some, but you really want to monitor yourself. So
wow.
So anyway, something to play around. And you can also, I haven't yet done this one because I don't feel I own the inspiration enough to do it. But you can do maximal in, maximal out. So you're kind of working both ends.
Wow. All right. We got to talk a little bit more about this next time, I think, Scott. But I think that's probably all for today. You got anything else?
Oh, no. I'm going to go do some of that and get on this ride.
I like it. Maybe it'll inspire you a little bit. Okay, so I'm Sean. I'm Sean LaFlock. You can get me at Sean@CrossFitDartyBeach.com. Scott
Agnes. You can get me at Scott@CrossFitPortland.com.
Awesome, Scotty. Enjoy your ride, buddy. I'll talk to you next week.
Will do. Talk to you next week.
Later, dude.